So, Mike, so you've been covering sports in New York for a long time. So let's face it, we
Yes, indeed.
are the capital of the world. New York City, the capital of the world for everything, for finance, for media, and for sports. We have 9 professional sports teams. I think LA has the second most, 6, but they have 2 in basketball. They have 2 in football. All right. So this is the place to be for sports. Now, and I've done the co-hosted with Ann Ligori on Fan, right? Now, God in his infinite wisdom, outside of baseball, where I root for the Mets, the Islanders in hockey, the Knicks in basketball, God, for some reason, made me a Minnesota Vikings fan in football because he wants me to suffer. That's the only thing I can figure out. Jets and Giants have both won Super Bowls, and of course the Vikings are the greatest team in professional sports never to win the Super Bowl. So you have, in the great age of internet and podcasts and all that, you've got these podcasts out of Minneapolis. These guys, it is the Purple Daily, it's called. Score North, I think, is the parent company. And they have these various shows that I like, all Vikings talk. So these guys are Judd Zulgad, Phil Mackey, and Declan Goff. And I'll tell you right off the bat, these guys, I've never met them, but Phil reads my stuff on the air. I'm going to show you that. They seem to be really, really nice guys. Good guy. And the reason that matters is, first of all, you're always supposed to be a nice man. I mean, that's the right way to be, ethically and morally. But in New York, we have some of our sportscasters that are not really nice people, condescending. I'm not going to say any names. You read Phil Mushnick's column in the Post, and pretty much everybody knows what we're talking about. It's always important to be a nice man. Now, so Minnesota Vikings last year, they had a very strange season. And never in my life, in following all 4 major sports, has a coach ever given me nightmares and kept me up at night tossing and turning. And not just a head coach, an assistant coach. Ed Donatel, the defensive coordinator for the Vikings last year, was their absolute downfall. Now, the Vikings had the greatest comeback in NFL history, down 33-0 at halftime. And one of the nonsense talking points after that comeback was that the defense had risen to the occasion. Baloney. And so let's watch this clip. These are very short clips from Mackey and Judd. It's funny because when Phil reads this stuff, the thing I find the funniest is Judd's body language and facial expressions. So let's watch this one first.
All right.
And then Frank Bella chimes in. You guys need to remove the halo you've placed around Kevin O'Connell's head. Once again, a miracle win has given KOC cover from his biggest colossal blunder, not firing Ed Donatel. I rewatched the Colts game, and it's an absolute falsehood that the defense played well. They allowed the usual chunks of yards in the first half, though they allowed only a field goal in the second half. The fact is, when a team is winning a blowout, they tend to get conservative. You think if the score was tied at halftime, the Colts would have scored only 3 points? I like O'Connell, but this is a litmus test issue. Failure to be the boss and make the decision to get rid of Donatel will cost them a real shot at winning the Super Bowl.
Okay, that all might be true, but hold on a second here. Let's go back to the disastrous first half, all right? The defense held, like the offense and special teams screwed up. Starting with, I believe, a 49-yard kick return to open the game for the Colts. And the defense held the Colts to field goals when they were trying to score. Now, that being said, I understand the Colts offense from a scoring standpoint stinks, okay? But I'm skeptical too. I'm skeptical about what this defense can do potentially in a playoff game. But all that being said, I think he's going to, even by my standards, I think he's going to great lengths to dismiss what actually was some nice stands by a defense. That if they give up touchdowns, the Vikings do not come back and win that game.
Yeah. Also, I mean, sometimes look at the data too. The Vikings defense allowed 4.4 yards per play in that game. On the season, they were allowing 6.1. Okay. So they were markedly better statistically. If you still want to carry the point forward that they were in conservative mode, that maybe the Colts were in conservative mode for at least the third quarter because the game was over in their minds, I will listen to that argument. I do not think the defense was incredible by any means, but I do think we saw some major adjustments, the blitzing, and I think they held strong when the Colts eventually tried to fire it back up. They couldn't in the second half because the Vikings defense was there. So would it be interesting to see now against the Giants?
All right. You know what? Listen. So it's so stupid. Everybody knows in sports, in football, when you have a big lead, you go conservative and you take the air out of the ball. So it's sort of circular reasoning that Phil was using. In other words, he's saying, well, okay, so but if you look at the metrics, instead of whatever it was, 6.2 yards per play, the Viking defense gave up 4.6. Well, sure, because the other team is letting the air out of the ball. Now listen, I warned that not getting rid of Donatel will cost them a shot at the Super Bowl. You heard it, right? Now, yeah. A month later, Phil reads my second email, and he references the first one, right, where I was right. Look, and even Declan jumps in saying that look, 3 times in Viking history have they won 13 games. The time is now. I mean, firing Donatel after the season, that doesn't help us. Well, it helps us going forward, but how often are you going to have a year like that? Now, this is really funny. Watch, if ever, Judd's body language and facial expression while Phil is reading this.
Well, Frank Bella, this is a good segue. Frank Bella chimes back in here. If you remember, and he reminds us here, I don't want to gloat because I am too sad and heartbroken, but last month, Phil read my note on the air where I was desperately demanding O'Connell to fire Ed Donatel before it was too late. I explicitly said the failure to make the move would cost the Vikings a chance to win the Super Bowl. Because of KOC's weakness and lack of stones, he has shown himself unfit for the job. O'Connell will eventually walk away from the Vikings and continue coaching in the NFL for many years, making lots of money, but he'll win no championships here, and we fans will be the ones to continue to suffer because of his failure to seize the moment. This was not just a mistake. It was a litmus test issue, obvious to everyone. Now the fans have to pay the price for his weakness and incompetence.
Wow.
Frank.
Okay, so first of all, Frank sounds like he sat down Sunday night and wrote that note. Just anger coming from his fingers. Just rage, rage and anger. All right, first of all, I do think that there was a case to be made that at some point during the season that like going to Mike Pettin at DC might have made more sense because it certainly appeared that what O'Connell was telling Donatel was not getting through. Yeah. That's unfortunate. Do I think Kevin O'Connell handled the situation perfectly? No. Do I think he learned from it? I certainly hope so. But when we get into calling him like gutless and stuff, I can't even go close to that. I didn't call him gutless. I have. I don't think he's gutless.
Said he lacks stones.
But the thing about this is he's young. He's in his first year.
Yeah.
Like if this is going to bother him in 3 years, we might have a problem. But I mean, I like to think that I'm the first guy to pounce and criticize, that I'm the first to dissect what guys did wrong. But, you know, I think that there's going to be a pressure on O'Connell now, and there should be, rightfully so, to get this hire right this time.
All right, well, he hired Brian Flores.
So I firmly believe that there is now a pressure. Dude, if you are going to turn the defense over, you got to have somebody who's good here, not who tells you what you want to hear. But I'm not going to go in on O'Connell yet. I don't think it's fair yet.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair either. And look, I know I kind of got a little roasted for saying it was cowardly for him to fire him yesterday instead of just addressing it at the press conference and dodging the media. Saw some YouTube comments and tweets about that.
Brian Murphy said the same thing and got destroyed on Twitter by people.
Murph is definitely more versatile and can definitely make those comments and has been around enough locker rooms to know what that's like too. But I agreed with Murph too that I thought he kind of fumbled that setting. And to be honest, KOC put his trust in Donatel. He put his trust in a veteran dude who's been around the block for like 20 years, and it failed. And then he didn't address it in time. And to the listener's point, I mean, you only win 13 games so many times. Right. I mean, the Vikings have won 13 games, only 3 times in their entire franchise history, and you're one and done in the wild card. And yeah, I know the one-score games you could make a case they're a little bit fluky, but at the same time, you had a path here, and your defense was the biggest reason you lost and went one and done. So, and that falls on your head coach.
So let's come back. So Judd is saying that I wrote this on Sunday night after the game. First off, I wrote that the day they fired Donatel, which was 3 days later. Okay, so because they mentioned that he'd been fired, so the game was Sunday. I think he got fired on a Wednesday. But the time is now. And to Phil's credit, he comes back and he says a month later, he says Frank reminds us that had they gotten rid of Donatel, we don't even need Brian Flores. You need an NFL caliber defensive coordinator, not a clown. And this whole thing about being lucky on one score wins, it was because of Ed Donatel. The Vikings, no matter how great the offense was, and I know it sputtered at times, could not win a game 23-10, 27-17. They couldn't win by more than a score because Donatel's defense could not stop anybody. So it's deceiving to say the Vikings were lucky and had all these one-score wins. They had one-score wins because they were always in one-score games. They were always in one-score games because of Ed Donatel's defense. All right. So, all right. So next clip, where the Vikings are a 13-win team. Forget that they're lucky. I allow for a 1 or 2 game regression because of the tougher schedule, but the team is better on offense and on defense. So anyway, you had to see Judd's reaction was hilarious. If you're watching his body language, his facial expression, he goes, wow. Okay. So let's go back. 1 more. 2 more. Okay. Share my screen again. Okay.
Get right into it here, boys. Frank Bella chimes in via the Score North app and says, like many Vikings fans, I have not been watching regularly this offseason, Purple Daily and Mackie and Juddy's talking about, as I continue my annual after-season depression.
Cleanse.
Before I go any further there, I feel like it's been 3 months now, right?
Yeah, they didn't like
almost 3 months.
Watching.
Yeah, come back in. Come on, Frank.
I think with the NFL, it's a little different. You can come back in quicker. Like it took me up until probably a week and a half ago to get over the Twins. So that was like 6 months of pent-up frustration. I think different sports allow different things. But with the Vikings, and the NFL, it's such a different beast.
I feel like the cleanse, though, with the Vikings, if you duck out too fast,
they digress on duck out for a prolonged period, you miss the fun. But they get back to the
combine and the free agency. Like I feel like if you're going to detox Vikings, you dump out for the rest of the playoffs. Like watch the games, but who cares? Because nothing happens then. And I would actually say the detox should then resume around July 1st, late June, and then go to training camp. Like I feel like
get your mind right during the summer months. Yeah,
but you're missing the fun. Like there's nothing. There's what's happened since the combine that's been frustrating. I think it's intriguing and interesting.
It's all hopeful. Like it kind of goes from you're frustrated for a couple weeks, but then it gets into speculation season, roster changing season. I'm with you. I think reserve. I mean, you should still be consuming Purple Daily and Mackie and Judd in June and July, right? Like, of course. But
Just trying to help here.
come on back here. But Frank says, you guys got it wrong last year, and you're getting it wrong again this year. I predicted a 13-win season last
That's all I
year,
got
Frank
right.
says. For 2023, with the roster they currently have, the Vikings are set to go to the NFC Championship game and beyond. The offense will be better. The defense will be a 14th to 19th ranked defense, which is all we need. The NFC is wide open. I don't buy that Philly, Dallas, or San Francisco are elite teams. I will allow a 1 or 2 game regression because of the tougher schedule, but the division is ours, and we should be the 1 or 2 seed. Write it down. Best to you guys.
Okay, let's
What
go,
do you
Frank.
think?
You know what? First of all, so he's not out. He's back in because he clearly heard what we said. So, Frank, welcome back. The water's warm. Let's go. I love it. Yes, you know what? This is, again, this is why you don't duck out right now. Because that statement, I can buy it. I might not agree completely, but I'm not going to.
Okay, if Philly and San Francisco aren't elite teams, then are you saying, Frank, that there are no elite teams in the NFC?
I'm saying that. Yeah.
Because Philly and San Francisco are the 2 best teams in the NFC.
Wild card team the year before.
Unless the Vikings surpass them.
49ers don't have a quarterback.
The NFC is wide open, which I agree with. But here's the problem: is there's always someone who won 7 games last year is going to pop up and look like the 1 or 2 best teams in the NFC. I didn't think the Eagles would go overnight from a wild card team to the number 1 team in the NFC this time last year. I don't think any of us really saw that. They could say, "Oh, yeah, they could be a sneaky team again." No one saw them being the juggernaut running through the whole dang conference from basically the start of the season to the Super Bowl. So someone that we're not thinking of is going to pop up and probably going to take over, and then everyone regresses too. So those law of averages tend to even out a little bit from regression to overachieving.
Rams come back?
Could.
Okay. So let's stop the share. So one more, and what's interesting about Mike, about the last thing Phil read. Now, sometimes I write lengthy stuff, they can't read it all. In this final clip, Phil says that there's more to my email that he doesn't read, and I'm sort of chastising them here. The Vikings are a championship caliber team, a win now team. And by the way, from that last clip, that was before they drafted Jordan Addison, so they really are better on offense, or at least on paper, right? So they have, I mean, these Phil and Judd, for sure, were absolutely passionately devoted to trading Kirk Cousins to the 49ers for Trey Lance, a guy who is probably he's a bust right now. So in other words, you're breaking up a championship caliber team, which is bad enough, but you're giving a fierce rival the one thing they need. You're giving the 49ers, Kirk Cousins, the one thing they need to win the championship. Okay. So he kind of leaves that out, but that's okay. I don't think he left it out on purpose. It's just lack of time. All right. So let's take a look at the final clip.
All right, Frank Bella chimes in here. Once again, you guys absolutely astound me. Intelligent people often say foolish things when they think with their emotions. No doubt, your antipathy toward Kirk Cousins.
Antipathy.
Antipathy.
They had to look it up.
That means.
Is that a word?
I've never heard of that word.
Yes, it's a word.
What does it mean, Jed?
I'm going to look it up to get the exact definition.
Deep-seated feeling of dislike or aversion.
Yep.
His
very well
fundamental
used.
antipathy.
Very well used, Frank.
Wow, Frank, dude.
Frank,
great word. I'm gonna mix that one in.
Yep.
No doubt your antipathy toward Kirk Cousins senselessly blinds you to the fact that the Vikings are a championship contending team this year. Don't get me wrong. As a Vikings fan, I have negativity in my DNA, but you guys speak matter-of-factly as if the Vikings are a 7 or 8 win team. Well, the market has them as like a 8.5, 9-win team right now. So, Frank, if you feel very strongly, go to Vegas, go to wherever you need to go.
I know I don't gamble, but
they are a 13-win team that had one major problem last year, Ed Donatel. Even with last year's roster, they could have been the 2 seed and probably would have won 2 playoff games at home, but not for the disaster of Donatel.
Okay.
There's more to this email, but get a grip. Enjoy our beloved Vikings. See if they can get to the Super Bowl with this team. Skol from New York City, Frank Bella.
Great word, Frank. Thank you very much.
Antipathy.
Antipathy.
I will say this. Dealing in might have beens and maybes is not what we do here. We deal in what you did. And that is why, and it's not antipathy, it is consternation that we have with a franchise that has never won a Super Bowl.
Well, you also keep in mind, so when you say they were a 13-win team with one problem, I think the counter to that is they were an historically lucky 13-win team. Now, sometimes do you make your own luck? Absolutely. And the Vikings made a lot of their own luck in the fourth quarter by just being precise, situational football. And that's one thing that they preached. But if you ran back that season again, and the Vikings had basically a break-even point differential for almost the whole season, if you ran that season back again, would they really have 8 fourth-quarter comebacks? Or were they more like a 9 or a 10-win team that just kind of had an anomaly run with fourth-quarter comebacks? Are they going to come back down 33 points at halftime against the Colts?
But they wouldn't be down.
Their process was more of a 9-win
Donovan.
process, and they got to 13 wins. And every season in the NFL is very different. The schedules are very different. So I would just be really careful thinking that because they won 13 games and their defense was bad and their defense should be better, that now it's a linear progression to 14 wins and NFC championship game. Like, that's not how the NFL works. So that's kind of what we're bracing for here.
So, okay. So first off, what's funny is, so they are guilty of the thing they're accusing me of. So Judd says, well, we don't deal in should-haves or would-haves, or we deal in what actually happened. And then they go on to say, well, but if you replayed the season, you think they would have had 13 wins? First off, I make the point again. Yeah, they were lucky, but they needed to be lucky because they were in one-score games. They were in one-score games not for some unknown mysterious reason, but because they had Ed Donatel. So when Phil says, well, all right, we replayed the season, well, then you're doing what you accused me of doing. What do you mean replay the season? And yeah, you think they would come back down 33? They wouldn't have been down 33, but for Ed Donatel's defense, which stunk. But anyway, I wrap that up, Mike, because I get a kick here in New York City showing the guy. I love those guys. It's a great show, and I really enjoyed the show, and I appreciate them reading my stuff on the air for sure.